The progressive disappearance of forests throughout the world is one of the most significant effects of humans' increasing influence on our planet. In many regions, forests have been clear-cut for timber, development, and agriculture. Species are being lost at a greater rate than ever before. The implications for global climate change and its consequences are still being studied. Scientists have been investigating global environmental change for decades, yet relatively little is known about the dynamics and social forces that drive human activities that affect the environment. In 1996, the National Science Foundation funded CIPEC, the Center for the Study of Institutions, Population, and Environmental Change, housed at Indiana University.
The mission of that center is to understand the human dimensions of global environmental change. And we propose to do that in the context of how people in the Western Hemisphere deforest, use the land after deforestation, and what forces lead to some areas growing back, while other areas remain unrestored or even degraded.
Governments face the challenge of balancing competing interests. In order to promote effective land management, policymakers need more information. CIPEC researchers currently work within 3 major forest ecosystems, studying different types of ownership and land management institutions within and across these zones. The number of research sites will increase over time as the project develops. During the westward expansion in the United States, the frontier spirit held to the notion that land was useful only when the forest was cleared. Indiana settlement began in the early 1800s. By 1920, 95% of the forest land had been cleared for agriculture. These actions were taken without full knowledge of the consequences, and the result proved detrimental both to the land and those who settled on it.
When they went in, they didn't have any conservation measures, and they cleared the land, and as the rains came, it washed away the productivity, and as they continued to farm, they took the nutrients out, and it was just came to a state where it was no longer profitable to farm this area. The government did come in and buy them out so they could survive, and converted it to forest land, which is probably what the land was suited for in the first place.
Today, Indiana is about 20% forested. This government-controlled portion is only a very small part. About 90% of the forested land is now in the hands of private landowners and is increasingly being subdivided into smaller and smaller pieces.
It isn't clear at all from the research that has been done elsewhere until now whether, in all cases, private institutional management is superior to communal or to government. Certainly conservation biologists sometimes think that the preferred form of protecting biodiversity is by keeping people out of an area and creating a protected park. Others in the social sciences have argued that if you create these artificial areas without humans, that the pressure of the human community outside the park is likely to lead to poaching and other forms of resource use, which are even more destructive than if you had well-informed citizens within the area who are responsible for managing the resource.
Different institutional rules, whether private, government, or communal, influence land cover changes. CIPEC researchers have gathered biophysical and interview data to help them understand the different rules for land management. From the interviews, one thing is clear: it's not just governments that preserve existing forests. Charlie Gaston, for example, has lived close to the land all his life, deriving a modest income and spiritual sustenance from 80 acres of mostly wooded property.
We get a lot of people stopping at the farm wanting to know why in the world are we here farming and preserving this farm. You know, every tree has a part of you, and when you cut one, you take part of yourself away. So this is why we're going to keep this forest like it is for next generation after us and next generation after them. And it's specified in the easement that the land can never be timbered for commercial use, but the trees that have fallen can be taken and used for the owner's use.
While the initial threat to forested land in Indiana was from agricultural uses, the current threat is from the pressures of residential development. The people of May Creek Farm are an intentional community established in the mid-1970s. In crafting their rules for land management, the group has focused on preservation in the face of urban growth and development.
The fact that we all live out here and yet we live in a low-impact way, I think really means that the more we're out here, the more we appreciate what's here. And the more we appreciate it, the more we want to protect what we have, and the more we understand as we look around us and even see in Bloomington the just unprecedented growth going on all over, that this is something that's a vanishing environment.
The increasing development creates unique pressures for government-managed forests. Fishermen, mountain bikers, hunters, mushroom pickers, and loggers all have their own unique demands. Not only is there a danger of forests being converted, we must also be concerned about forests being degraded.
I think the development in the area is a major stress. Not only is it creating less forest habitat outside the state forests, but it is also increasing the number of users we have.
When looking at land cover change, it is necessary to understand the history of human interaction with the ecosystem. In the case of Indiana, the transition from deforestation to forest regrowth took over 100 years. A remarkably similar rate of deforestation is taking place now in the Brazilian Amazon, a century and a half later. CIPEC studies different human groups in different geographic locations with different histories in order to understand a broad view of the forces that affect the past and future of forests.
Each of those places has a different history. They have different microclimates, and they have different cultures that have affected the way people think about the forest and think about resources. And so what we're trying to do is understand in the larger project, what is it that makes different groups, different human communities, follow a particular trajectory or pattern of deforestation and land use compared to others, and under what conditions.
Here at CIPEC, co-director Eleanor Ostrom is training researchers from Asia and Africa. CIPEC will continue to teach researchers to use this methodology to study sites on their continents. CIPEC researchers are working to understand how institutional rules interact with biophysical changes. Armed with data about forest use, governments will be better equipped to write policies to meet the needs of both the human population and the environment, now and into the coming century.